Hi, and welcome to the channel Biblical Mysteries. My name is Dr. Rich Sorensen, and I'm your host for this channel. Our purpose here is to do in-depth explorations of biblical topics from both a scientific and a religious perspective. And in the 2 episodes of this session, we're going to consider the physical and the psychological characteristics of the Nephilim, an ancient and very strange race. They were hybrids, part demon and part human. And even though, like the dinosaurs, they are extinct, through genetics, their characteristics may very well be living on. Now, in this first episode, I'll provide background on the Nephilim and on their fathers, who are known as the sons of God, on their place in ancient history, and on some of the things that they did. And in the second and final episode, I will cover their actions and their physiology in more depth, and how the Nephilim may have been psychopathic due to their genetic makeup. Now, as we proceed with this topic, I'll be referring to many resources that you may want to check out for yourself. This video is based on a paper I've written, which footnotes all of the references, so there are links to the paper in the description box. So, let's start with background on the Nephilim and their fathers, the sons of God. The Nephilim are first mentioned in the Bible in Genesis as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. This is one of the most cryptic passages in the Bible, so let's read it. Now it came about that when men began to multiply in the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. And they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men, the heroes of old, men of renown." And that's from Genesis chapter 6. Now the Bible here indicates that the Nephilim were mighty men, who apparently were very strong. It also states that they were men of renown, so they were apparently able to do great feats, both in battle and in building things. Now, the psychological characteristics of the Nephilim are not specifically described in the Bible, but there are other writings from the 3rd century BC that portray the Nephilim as being very tall, essentially giants, strong, belligerent, and sexually aggressive. The word psychopathic is, of course, a modern term, but it seems to describe what they were like. Genesis 6 goes on to say, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth." And that's also from Genesis 6. Now, we have little knowledge of what life was like in those times, but considering that one may have had large and hostile neighbors, it could well have been a very dangerous time to live. Furthermore, as the Nephilim interbred with the population at that time, it may well explain how the wickedness of mankind became so endemic that God responded with the flood of Noah. So as we proceed, we'll be connecting biblical dots from the text that we just read. Now, the text indicates that the Nephilim were fathered by the sons of God, who desired the daughters of men and took whatever women they chose to mate with. And for centuries, scholars have debated the identity of the sons of God. Some have suggested that they were human men, either divinized individuals or possibly the descendants of Seth, the 3rd son of Adam. In other words, they were quote-unquote good men. But the text explicitly contrasts the nature of the sons as being of God versus the daughters as being of men. Furthermore, the continuing context in Genesis indicates that these sons of God were somehow instrumental in debasing human society and making it so corrupt that God reduced human lifespan and ultimately became sorry that he had made man on the earth. Therefore, like Satan, the sons of God were evil rather than beneficial. Now, others have raised the possibility that they were descendants of Cain. In other words, they were quote unquote bad men. However, that view also does not fit with the context. If a purely human connection was intended, the writer could have stated the sons of Seth or Cain and the daughters of Seth or Cain. It is also difficult, if not impossible, to understand how a purely human connection could have produced the Nephilim, who were essentially evil giants. So, in my opinion and understanding, the sons of God were spirit beings. In other words, they were ex-angels or demons who assumed human form and mated with human women. This seems to be the position most in accord with other biblical texts, as well as providing a framework for understanding what the world was like in those ancient times, and why God responded in the extreme manner that he did. The eventual consequence was a flood that destroyed most of humanity, whereas the fate of the spirit beings who were instrumental in debasing people is described in the Bible as follows. For God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to pits of darkness, reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world. And that's from 2 Peter. Now it's clear from the above text and others that God considers the moral actions of both people and angels to be a serious issue and wants fairness and justice to prevail. Now, those who consider the Bible to be primarily mythological may believe that the sons of God were actually the ancient aliens that are often discussed in the media and on the internet, and who are said to be an advanced humanoid race that came from elsewhere in the universe. One of the main originators of this idea was Erich von Däniken, with his 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods. And many have followed in his steps. And ancient aliens have become a long-running media attraction, along with speculations on the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, Stonehenge, the Easter Island figures, Atlantis, and many others. Now, one of the best examples of ancient ruins for which conventional archaeology does not have a sufficient explanation is Pumapunku, located in a high mountainous region of Bolivia near La Paz and Lake Titicaca. It's part of Tiwanaku, a large complex that the Incas believed to be the site where the world was created. At this location, there are huge carved stone blocks, shown here weighing many tons, which are scattered around the landscape like toys in a kid's playroom. And at the site, there are around 80 ancient H blocks, some of which are shown here. Now, many of these and other blocks seem to have been machined with precision tools. The surfaces are smooth, and a number of them have drill holes and complex indentations where the stone was either molded or cut with a laser or a diamond saw in order to achieve precise angles. The source of the stone was a quarry a number of miles away, but given the mountainous location and the lack of trees, it defies the imagination as to how these blocks could have been cut and then transported to the site by an ancient civilization. The purpose of the construction is unknown. According to local legend, Pumapunku was built by the gods and/or giants, who later disappeared, followed by a catastrophic flood which destroyed the site. Now, one of the most prolific and tenacious researchers is Graham Hancock, who has done extensive literary and archaeological investigations on the ancient world and has published many books. In his video series, Ancient Apocalypse, which is available on Netflix, Hancock investigates a number of ancient megalithic sites, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Cholula in Mexico, the pyramids of Egypt, and many others. And like Pumapunku, all of these involve huge construction projects using massive multi-ton stone blocks and are seemingly impossible to have been built by ancient peoples with Stone Age tools. A summary of speculations about the ancient aliens are as follows. There are many ancient structures around the entire globe that could not possibly have been built by hunter-gatherer peoples with the limited technology available to them. These structures typically have a religious and a sacrificial significance, as well as a connection to the stars. Number 2, a more technologically advanced and physically stronger civilization or group came to Earth from elsewhere in the universe to educate people. But perhaps their goal was also to indoctrinate, corrupt, and enslave. The structures mentioned above were built by them or under their direction. The arrival of this superior group is clear from both ancient art as well as from the creation legends that have been passed down through many civilizations. The land area of the globe was probably connected at the time. For example, South America was joined with Africa into what has been referred to as Pangea. That would have made migration between the land areas much easier. The oceans were also smaller, and the climate of the Earth was also different, with the entire planet being warm. In other words, the polar regions were not frigid as they are now. Number 3. The ancient aliens then disappeared for reasons unknown. A catastrophic flood devastated the Earth, and only a few people were spared to repopulate the planet. Virtually all civilizations have stories of this event, such as the legend of Gilgamesh from Babylon. Number 4. Along with the flood, volcanoes erupted, spewing huge quantities of ash into the atmosphere, which cooled the Earth due to all of the particulate matter obscuring the rays of the sun. The enlarged oceans provided more water vapor, and huge amounts of snow fell in various places, which then compacted into glaciers, generating what we call the Ice Age. The Earth eventually warmed, the glaciers receded, and the geologic and climatic characteristics of our times were then established, which are substantially different from the pre-flood world. Now, the possibility of other humanoid civilizations has generated a huge desire to find them. And many of the space initiatives by NASA and others, such as the James Webb Telescope, is focused on the search for exoplanets capable of supporting intelligent life. But to date, no such planet has as yet been found. The SETI program, which is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has large arrays of dish antennas all around the world listening for alien communication. And it's been in operation for around 60 years. But they haven't found anything either. However, a better answer has been under our noses for centuries. The above speculations by Hancock and other ancient alien enthusiasts are a complete fit for what the Bible tells us took place, with only a few details changed, as follows. Number 1. The sons of God came from other locations in the universe and possibly had direct connections with certain stars, galaxies, or galactic regions over which they ruled or had influence. So rather than being a humanoid race from another planet, for example, the Anunnaki from the planet Nibiru, they were ex-angels or demons in human form. Why did they come to Earth? Possibly because there were no people in the area of their domain, and they sought subjects over which they could rule, and with whom they could create their own race and progeny. They may very well have wanted to emulate God's creative capability in the same manner that the great enemy Morgoth created the race of orcs in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The Sirius star system is one of the brightest in the night sky and is relatively close to our galaxy. It's part of the constellation Canis Major, and was known as the Dog Star in many ancient cultures, Babylonian, Assyrian, Chinese, and even North American societies. It was revered by some African societies, and in ancient Egypt, it was the most important star in the sky, associated with the god Isis and the foundation of Egyptian astronomy, calendars, and religion. It was also instrumental in the Egyptian economy because its rising occurred just before the annual summer flooding of the Nile. Astronomical studies of the Sirius star system have concluded that life would not generally be possible on any orbiting planets there, but some of the sons of God may have come from that region of the heavens and or previously ruled over it. The sons of God came to Earth possibly on or near Mount Hermon, as we'll discuss in the next episode. They selected human women, mated with them, and the hybrid race known as the Nephilim were born from these unions. The Nephilim, along with the sons of God, then built the ancient structures referred to above, possibly using the human population as additional labor. Number 2. The sons of God educated people on a variety of topics, as we will discuss later, but also corrupted and enslaved them. These ex-angels or demons were the inspiration for the national deities, such as Viracocha from the Incas, Quetzalcoatl from the Aztecs, Bel, Marduk, Astarte, and Ishtar from Mesopotamia, Sumer, and Akkad, Mat, Ptah, Amun, Aten, Osiris, and Isis from Egypt, Molech, Chemosh, Baal from Canaan, and many others. All of these had connections to actual angelic demonic beings alluded to in the Bible as the host of heaven. It's therefore a mistake to think of these ancient gods and goddesses as purely mythological, and we'll be covering their origins in another episode on this channel. Now, in his book, The Lost World of Adam and Eve, John Walton describes the nature of these gods of the ancient world and the worship that these gods demanded of the people. The gods were capricious, selfish, and often cruel. Humans existed only to serve and cater to them. For example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the reason given for the gods sending the flood of Noah was that the people were making too much noise, and the gods therefore had trouble sleeping. Poor gods. Number 3, the conditions of society grew worse as evil proliferated and the Nephilim interbred with the population, and then they attacked other groups. God eventually removed the sons of God and imprisoned them in a hellish place known as Tartarus, as described above. At the same time, he decreed the flood of Noah as a judgment on the world in which only 8 individuals, along with animals, survived in the ark. The flood was a worldwide catastrophe and was accompanied by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, both on land and under the seas, resulting in the separation of the continents and in the climatic and geologic changes that were described above. The destruction was not due merely to normal rainfall. It's speculated that the Earth was previously surrounded by a vapor canopy, which would have made temperatures more moderate around the entire planet. Genesis chapter 2 states, "For the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground, but a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." That indicates that the pre-flood climate and atmospheric conditions were very different from the ones today. Much of the water that is now in the oceans may have thus originally been in the sky. And if the flood was initiated by a drop in atmospheric temperature, then the vapor canopy would have collapsed, causing catastrophic precipitation. Now, many geologists mock the idea of a universal flood. They think that it cannot be possible. They may very well be correct, because the destruction of all life on Earth would not have required a worldwide flood, and the Bible does not say that water covered every land area on the globe. The flood was accompanied by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, both on land and under the seas. As in the case of contemporary tsunamis, life may have been destroyed by hurricane-force winds or other extreme geologic activity that happened at the same time, such as Pangaea splitting apart. Therefore, perhaps only a smaller area of the world was covered with water, but the results were still catastrophic. In the words of Genesis, all the springs of the great deep burst forth. The flood was followed by the Ice Age. Hancock and the others date the Ice Age to approximately 10,000 BC, which is at variance with most biblical dating. But the only secure dating method that we have is carbon-14, and that method requires organic material. It is based on the amount of radioactive isotope carbon-14 in the sample being tested relative to normal carbon, which is carbon-12. This dating method assumes that the amount of carbon-14 in the original was the same as in contemporary organic material. But that may very well not be the case. Carbon-14 is created by cosmic radiation, and in ancient times the world may have been better protected and cleaner with lower amounts of radioactive carbon and other pollutants in nature. Factors such as this may also explain the longer lives of the people in the book of Genesis, as well as resulting in older and perhaps wildly incorrect dates when ancient organic material is tested and dated. So, rather than 10,000 BC, these events could have taken place around 3,500 BC, with the Ice Age lasting for a shorter period of time. Despite the contention from some geologists that there have been multiple Ice Ages, there probably was only one. The Greek legends of Zeus and the Titans have a similar connection to the sons of God. The Titans were said to be a group of spiritual beings, or lesser gods, who rebelled against their father, came to Earth, engaged in a variety of mischief, mated with women, and produced half-breed children of incredible strength, such as Atlas. And he's pictured here, of course, carrying the world on his shoulders. However, Zeus captured the Titans and imprisoned them in Tartarus, in other words, in hell. The Incas have a similar legend. Their god Viracocha created giants who rebelled and then returned into the stone seen at Tiwanaku. The biblical book of Jude states, "And angels who do not keep their own domain, but abandon their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day." And that's from Jude 6. Now the term eternal bonds under darkness is the Greek word Tartarus. So the same Greek word is used in the Bible to describe the fate of the sons of God. Also quoted above were the verses from the second book of Peter, who stated the fate of the sons of God and the connection between their actions and the flood of Noah. The legends of the Titans is thus another ancient analog to the sons of God and the Nephilim, with only a few details changed. Now, despite all this background, there is scholarly disagreement about who and what the Nephilim were. The word Nephilim probably comes from the Hebrew word Nephilim, meaning fallen, in the sense of become evil. So it is a description of their character rather than their name as a group. The book of Ezekiel, chapter 32, refers to Geborim Nephilim, meaning fallen warriors. But the word may also mean giant, from the Greek, which originally meant earthborn, but later the word came to have its current meaning of large size and strength. Now, the Nephilim apparently had a hybrid nature that was both human and demonic, and their genetics included both of these elements. In the book of Enoch, they were called bastards, neither fully human nor fully spirit. The book of Genesis does not give us any further details on the Nephilim in the days of Noah, but they were said to reappear after the flood in the land of Canaan. The spies sent out by Joshua to explore the land of Canaan returned with the following report. "We went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there." And the sons of Anak were said to be descendants of the Nephilim. "The land through which we have gone and spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw in it were men of great size. There we also saw the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." And that's from Numbers chapter 13. Now, it should be noted here that the spies had never seen any pre-flood Nephilim. So the use of that word here does not prove that these large men that they saw were actually related to the ones described in Genesis chapter 6. If the individuals that the spies observed were somehow related to the pre-flood Nephilim, they were fully human at that point, albeit with the physical and psychological characteristics similar to their ancestors. How did they survive the flood? That is the subject of another video series in Biblical Mysteries. But given the history of Canaan that we shall explore later, it is a reasonable conclusion that some of the Canaanite peoples were actually descended from the Nephilim. Now, in our day, there is a great resistance to anything supernatural. Postmoderns have been inculcated with the idea that science equals good and religion equals bad, that science is intelligent and contemporary, and religion is backwards and medieval. Now, as our ancient ancestors did not fully understand the cause for diseases and the scientific aspects of nature, they often ascribed disasters and mysterious events to the action of the gods. But now we supposedly know better. The supernatural is said to be an ancient myth, and therefore we're able to fully rely upon science. Or are we? Even scientists now acknowledge the existence of the soul, even though it's impossible to prove this issue one way or the other. In some near-death experiences, the person had flatlined, but they later reported seeing and hearing things that took place after their brain was technically dead. The Bible is likewise considered by many to be myth, but there is way too much evidence for the Bible's veracity to ignore it. Our culture is therefore in great danger of making the opposite error of our ancient ancestors. As Solomon said, "As you do not know the path of the wind, or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things." That's from Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Now, quantum physics has shown us that the reality which we see and touch is vastly different at its basic level, atomic and subatomic. Contrary to the notion that atoms, being solid balls of matter, as imagined back in Newtonian times, they are now seen as being mostly empty space. Someone used this analogy. If the nucleus of each atom is a fly on the pitcher's mound of a stadium, then the electrons surrounding the nucleus are minute gnats circling the stadium. Therefore, things that seem to us as solid, such as the surface of a desk, are only so because we can only see and experience the world at the macro level. The quantum world is therefore sub-empirical. And the Bible often speaks of an unseen spiritual world. For momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things that are not seen are eternal. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Now this unseen realm, which according to the above text is more permanent and therefore more real than the physical world, is inhabited by spirit beings who have the ability to interact with our physical world. Our bodies are composed of carbon-based compounds, whereas angels and demons may have a nature that is totally beyond our current physics and chemistry. What is spirit? Do all spirit beings have the same nature? And are angels and demons made up of the same stuff as God? We barely understand physical matter and have no clue at all as to what spirit is composed of and what its capabilities are. So therefore, we don't understand how a spirit-to-body transformation would work and what the limitations are, if any. Nevertheless, the Bible records many instances where spirit beings assumed human form, or at least were visible to people, and interacted with them. For example, Genesis 18 tells of a lengthy meeting between Abraham and several spirit beings who appeared to be human and who both talked and ate with him. Now, some scientists have posited that our universe has dimensions beyond the four that we know: length, width, height, and time. And superstring theory holds that there are 10 dimensions, in which the additional 6 are possibly collapsed in minute quantum distances within the existing dimensions. These additional dimensions may be the realm of spirit beings, which would help explain why they can appear and disappear at will. It could also explain how spirit beings could instantaneously move between regions in our universe which are light years apart. Therefore, what we now perceive is only a small portion of reality, and we have no idea what the laws of science are that underlie all of this unknown complexity. Now, the laws of science, such as the first law of thermodynamics, the conservation of matter energy, or E equals mc squared, are not necessarily universal. They are only universal laws in the sense that we have never observed any exceptions to them in the physical world. However, if we were able to fully analyze and understand both the physical and the spiritual, we may discover that the laws of science that we know can have exceptions and/or are simply a small subset of a much larger and more fundamental set of laws. We are able to use electrons to create electricity, for example, and we've developed electron microscopes to improve our ability to see inside cells. But how can we actually see an electron? Not only are we unable to see subatomic entities, we have difficulty even conceptualizing how they work. For example, why do subatomic entities sometimes behave as particles and other times as waves? How does gravity work? Why does time slow down as an object speeds up? So in the words of the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Niels Bohr, everything that we call real is made up of things that cannot be regarded as real. Thus, we are essentially clueless regarding any reality beyond our four dimensions and have no way of detecting or analyzing it, much less of understanding or controlling it. Consider the following quote. Our modern worldview, obsessed as it is with empirical science and human reason, is blinded to its own ignorance of transcendent reality. Modern material descriptions of reality are therefore more false than ancient pictures because they do not include the immaterial aspects of reality: spirit, meaning, and purpose. Furthermore, science is always changing, from Newtonian physics to quantum physics to string theory. That change is primarily a change in ideas, so a proper response should be more humility and less hubris regarding the use of science in judging theological meaning and purpose. Now, the Hebrew term used for the sons of God in the Genesis 6 passage is Beni Ha Elohim, where Beni Ha means son of, and Elohim means God. The word Elohim is a term used elsewhere in the Old Testament, mostly for God, in other words, for the Most High God, or Jehovah, who is himself a spirit being. But sometimes it is also used for spirit beings in general. Therefore, it sometimes may refer to a God with a lowercase g, or what the New Testament would call an angel or a demon. These are individuals, spiritual individuals that are given authority, but they are not to be worshipped. The word Elohim in the Old Testament thus may mean Jehovah, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, a lesser spirit being that could be good or bad, or a group of them. The context is necessary to understand who or what is being referred to. Now, spirit beings may therefore be either good, in other words, angelic, or bad, in other words, demonic. All spirit beings, at least all the ones that are described in the Bible, seem to have the same basic nature, although we know very little of them and the potential differences between them. For example, are there species of angels and or demons? We don't know. However, the major difference is in their moral characteristics, in the same way that humans can either be morally good or bad. Of course, human morality is far from absolute. Even the most moral individuals have faults, and likewise the worst individuals may have one or more redeeming qualities. But there seems to be a sharp and perhaps a total moral division among spirit beings, either for God or against him. Now, this may be an attribute of their nature, and or it may be impossible to hide one's orientation. And once a spirit being has chosen to join the dark side, they have essentially rejected God and everything that God stands for, so they become everything that God is not. Apparently, it's not possible for demons to repent and return to being an angel, due either to their own choice, in other words, they've taken a vow and will not turn back, or a divine refusal to allow repentance. Another significant difference is that there is a pronounced hierarchy, with some spirit beings being much more powerful than others. Among humans, height, strength, and athletic ability vary, as well as degree of intelligence, but hierarchy in the spirit world seems to be much more extensive, with some having very great power and authority, and others much less. The Bible speaks of cherubim and seraphim as being super angels, and rather than being chubby little decorations, cherubim are actually leaders of awesome power, and seraphim are spirits of fire. However, their exact characteristics and the specific differences between them and regular angels is not fully described. On the good side, there are many angels that are unnamed, as well as cherubim or archangels, and two of them are named in the Bible, Michael and Gabriel. On the bad side, there are many demons that are also unnamed, as well as the ex-archangel Satan, who is known by many names, such as the devil, the accuser, Belial, Apollyon, the serpent of old, the great dragon, and so forth. Now, the Bible tells us there are a large number of these spirit beings who are referred to as the host of heaven, and sometimes they're also called the divine council, although the number of spirit beings in the divine council seems to be limited to those of greater power and authority. Now, we have no idea of how many there are, although the Bible may provide an indication of the relative number of angels versus demons. The book of Revelation states, "Behold, a great red dragon, His tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. This would imply that a third of the angels became demons. There is a constant war taking place in the unseen realm, a war over the souls of people, as illustrated in the following text. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God, so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. And that's from Ephesians chapter 6. Now, unlike humans, spirit beings apparently do not have any need of reproductive capability, either by sex or by means of the power of creation. In Luke chapter 20, Jesus indicates that marriage will not take place after the resurrection, but he does not specifically mention either sex or reproduction, although they may be included by implication. It therefore seems that spirit beings do not have any reproductive capabilities either, but when the sons of God from Genesis 6 assumed human form, they were capable not just of talking and eating, as mentioned above, but also of sexual activity. This raises the question, why would the sons of God do what they did and risk divine judgment? There are a number of possible answers. Number one, demons, like many arrogant people, are in denial about their ultimate destiny. Number two, the task assigned to angels by God is to be his messengers and therefore to serve people. Satan, the proud spirit, thought that task was beneath him and wanted to rule instead. And he sort of operated by the quote, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Some of the other angels apparently felt the same way. Why serve when we can rule instead? Hence the defection of many of them into Satan's camp. Demons are therefore in rebellion against God and seek to corrupt, pollute, and tear down everything that God does and stands for. As Jesus said in John chapter 10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Number three, demons have intense desires to inhabit and control other beings, especially humans. We often speak of demonic oppression and demonic possession, in which spirit beings entice an individual in order to enter that person, oppress them, and if possible, take full control. People are attracted to this by occultic gateways, such as Ouija boards, fortune-telling, tarot cards, mediums, spiritism, and so forth, and they may become hooked. Number four, as mentioned above, angels and demons seemingly do not have any reproductive capabilities, but Satan wanted to be like God, and therefore capable of producing offspring and creating his own tribe, similar to what was mentioned above in regard to the orcs. Producing the Nephilim allowed the demons to create their own race, devoted to them and like them, and an army of hybrids for attacking and destroying the rest of society. Number five, God created plants, animals, and humans to reproduce after their kinds, with genetic barriers against the commingling of kinds. Miscegenation is therefore wrong in the eyes of God. The demons of Genesis 6 sought to produce hybrids that would A, be a slap in God's face, and B, would be like them, but also amenable to their control. And finally, number 6, in response to the sin of Adam and Eve, God indicated that there would be a continual war between Satan and the seed of the woman. In other words, between her children, which is all of us, and ultimately the Messiah, who would eventually destroy the devil. Therefore, Satan wanted to corrupt the bloodline leading to Christ in order to pervert and defeat God's plans. The devil was unsuccessful in corrupting the messianic bloodline, but he may have succeeded in continuing the hybrid race that the sons of God created, and through genetics, he may have been able to perpetuate his bent for evil and psychopathology. This is the end of the first episode of the session, Were the Nephilim Genetically Psychopathic? To continue, please launch episode number 2. If you like this channel, please click on the like and share buttons. If you want to see more videos from this channel, please click on the subscribe and notify buttons. Thanks for watching.